Live.
All right. What's up, everybody? Matt and Carla Stinton here.
Yeah.
And we're getting rolling. We're doing something new today. Doing something a little bit new. And so if it's clunky, sorry if it's clunky.
If it's clunky, that's what people like. People like
clunky, right?
Yeah. And for those that are watching on Instagram, we have both, like we have this camera and an Instagram, like an iPhone going at the same time. So we just figured we would like give people options.
Yeah. We're trying to multitask. Really, we're 3-4 things all at once.
The computers are multitasking.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Everyone should know that going live has made Matt really like nervous. I don't know why, or like something about going live.
It's coordinating all the details.
It has to be perfect. And this just shows the difference in our personalities, I think, where I'm like, let's just do it. And Matt has been meticulously making this the best version
that we can
make it. So there's an appreciation for both. Oh no. No power mode. But anyway, so if you guys are not familiar with our podcast, it's called The New Self, and it's available everywhere on all streaming platforms, correct?
Yeah, where you get your podcasts.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple Music. And we have been tackling some issues that we feel passionate about, and this one is no different. We decided to talk about church hurt.
Yeah. We tend to focus around things like spirituality, like spiritual health and emotional health. Those are kind of our passions. I mean, there's other passions too, but we really think this is a really important world that the church, for the most part, doesn't spend a lot of time talking about. This is just kind of a preface for those of you who are listening for the very first time. The reason we're so passionate about this is so much of the time you have people that are really hurt, really emotionally wounded. They've been through trauma in their lives, and trauma, we always think, oh, trauma, that means, somebody dying at a young age or some major fallout. And no, actually, trauma looks like all sorts of things. The truth is, people get hurt by all sorts of things in their lives. And a lot of times the church doesn't like to talk about it because we feel like we have to put this face on that says, I have it all together because I have Jesus. Well, here's the truth. Nobody has it all together. And including people who have Jesus. So we are big fans of authenticity and not faking when you're hurt. Because if you're hurt, you're hurt. And if you stuff it, that's a big problem. As people go to the doctor. I'll just wrap the intro up with this idea. People go to the doctor all the time for checkups. They will go in and they will say, doctor takes a look at them. And they're like, okay, this looks good. This looks good. Hey, what's this? We should look at this. Your blood pressure is a little high, whatever it happens to be. And they can start addressing the issue then. If they decided, I'm never going to the doctor until something's wrong, for a lot of people, it's going to be kind of too late, because they have dealt with, they've gotten to a point where now this thing has gone so far that their physical health is in serious jeopardy, all because they wouldn't take care of themselves along the way. We believe that being emotionally healthy is, it's basically going to the doctor and getting checkups and making sure that all along the way that you are doing what needs to be done to be healthy, to be happy.
Yep. And on that, that's a good intro to what we wanted to talk about. I think church hurt is like a term that people kind of throw around, like, oh, like, that person is church hurt, or I'm church hurt. And I think it does mean different things for different people. Matt and I both have grown up in the church, and I think we have, at some different levels, we've all experienced, church hurt. Someone in church hurt us. And like anything in life, though, what you do with that is going to determine how long you stay in that, fill in the blank. And some people have been hurt to the point where they won't even enter a church. And I think, oh man, like, wouldn't the enemy love to have people kind of trapped in their own pain in this perpetual circle of like unforgiveness and anger and bitterness, and keep them from the very thing that could actually help them. Well, not could help, will help.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
it's
think,
church and Jesus.
yeah, I mean, it's not the, yeah, when we say church, I don't know, I don't think necessarily we're putting the emphasis. I mean, it's important to gather and go to a place and be with people in community. The actual building is not going to save you. And for new listeners or for people that are unfamiliar with church language, yeah, the building itself, there's nothing special about the building, but it's coming together and what you do in that place that Jesus is that's the
Yeah.
he is the one that helps, not the four walls, but we are commanded, we are encouraged to go to church. And this year, that looks different for a lot of people. And um, so we're just gonna kind of tackle all the stuff.
Yeah, and usually what you see have happen is people who get wounded by the church will also kind of keep Jesus at a arm's length too.
Right.
It's they there's because the two go hand in hand, you'll see people that they will still say, "Yeah, I love Jesus and all that," but they actually, and I'm not saying that they don't, but they do tend to even keep Jesus at an arm's length. And that is, I think, the danger, and one of the many dangers of this
Yeah.
sort of staying church hurt. uh, but the truth is like pain is just part of life. We experience pain, and it's important for us to not pretend that that things affect us, because they do.
Yeah. Yeah, they totally do. And there's, I think on that note, growing up, maybe we all grew up in different church environments. Personally, I grew up in a church that was like it's perfection or nothing at all. So you can't have like you the message was never verbatim, but the message was you can't have anything wrong with you. You can't be hurt by people, or you can't like go through whatever negative, unhappy experiences. I can fill in the blank. This is live from downstairs. It's Carla trying to figure out what she wants to say. They're
An
just
internal processor is trying to externally
It's
process. It's a
true,
beautiful
it's
thing.
true. It's it can get kinda jumbly. No, essentially it was, here's the thing, you perform, you're perfect, that's it. And I remember as a kid thinking like, well, I mean, people go through stuff. If they can't bring their stuff to church, where are they going to bring their stuff? And I saw so many people throughout teenage life, and like their 20s and 30s, like they haven't stepped foot in a church because they're dealing with some sort of shame or the feeling of I'm not good enough because they never actually hit the bar that people said you have to be up here in order to be a part of this group. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's the mentality that we want people to figure their problems out before they come to church.
Which is like totally not the gospel.
It's not the gospel at all, but it's also a very prevalent sort of attitude
Yeah.
that we see happen in churches all the time, which is why you have so many people who desperately need
Yeah.
Jesus, but they won't go to Jesus because they associate Jesus with people who are judging them, pushing them away.
Right. And if you and at the like I can only speak from a personal experience, but being a person who um still goes to church, and personally I love going to church, you get associated with that judgmental Jesus, which is not the real Jesus at all. And it's been kind of heartbreaking on my end. You want people to know like I'm not here to judge you, and I'm not here to make you feel bad for the decisions that you've made, but this church hurt, whatever, it becomes the lens that people see Christians and they see church through. And it's kind of, again, kind of what we said at the beginning. The enemy would love for people to sit in their pain and in their frustration and not have access to the very thing, the very people, the very community that actually is waiting on the other side to bring you in and to show you like church and Jesus, like good, judgmental and, um scoffers bad. Like I don't know how else to,
Yeah.
you know, it's pretty black and white, but people's experiences also have never been validated. And there's a bunch of stuff that we could talk about. But that's not for today's
Correct.
topic. Matt is thinking like, Carla, stop talking, stop
Oh,
talking.
that's not at all what I was thinking. But
Get back on topic.
But let's get on topic now that you've brought it up so gracefully.
Yeah.
So we want to talk a little bit about how people end up getting church hurt.
Yeah.
And really just to boil down what we've sort of been hinting at it. What we mean by church hurt is you've been hurt, you've been burned by the church, and now you don't want to go back.
That's a perfect description.
Well, I do
definition.
So how does this happen, Carla?
I'm just trying to make Matt laugh just a little bit because you have a nice smile.
Oh, thanks. So tell us, how do people get church hurt?
I mean, here's again, I think kind of like to reiterate what we've said, they experienced hurt. They were told that, the message is what you're doing is wrong, fix it, or there's not a seat for you at this table. And
Oh, so you mean perfection, not grace.
exactly. And that message really doesn't hit well with a lot of people. It doesn't sit well because you're telling me I have to do something in order to belong. And again, like if you don't walk away with anything else from this podcast, that is not the gospel. Plain and simple. Jesus did not die to tell you that seat at the table is only there for when you are perfect. That seat at the table is there for you so that when you can sit there, you can sit with me and learn from me, I mean, it's a great message, but I know we're talking about church hurt. We're not talking about
We're sort of talking about that now, though.
We're not talking about the seat at the table, but
Yeah.
I love that illustration.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's there's probably a few sources where a few different ways that people get church hurt. That being one of them. And, I think that you could put that under the category of being legalistic.
Yeah.
Being controlling, being legalistic. And that is for sure a big problem.
Yep.
So you see these people, you go to those churches, we've probably all been there, where that is the message is you are not good enough yet.
Right.
And a lot of times there's not even a yet there. It's just you're not good enough.
Right.
So you get that sort of thing. Another one I think is a lot of times churches not being equipped to handle people's problems.
Absolutely.
So one, they don't have grace, but two, they actually don't know how to handle issues when they come up. And hey, guess what? If you're working with people, for any of you who are leaders, any of you who want to be leaders, if you are going to be in leadership, you're going to have to learn how to deal with people.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to have the answer to every problem that you face, but you're going to have to learn how to deal with people. You can't just say that person has a problem, we need to tell them they need to leave the church.
Right.
That's not how that works.
Right.
That's not the message of the gospel. What we have to realize is we have a responsibility as followers of Christ to extend the same grace to others that he extended to us.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of times churches aren't equipped to handle people. And I know, like, you went to a Bible college.
I did.
And how many classes did you take on how to pastor people through their problems?
None. that wasn't my track, but even like the pastoral care class, it takes more than 16 weeks of a class to learn how to take care of people. That's just, and when you're 19 years old, you just don't really have, you, you just don't have like understanding of like,
Yeah.
of how to help people
Well, your
because you
brain
need
isn't,
help.
yeah, and your brain hasn't even fully developed yet at that point.
Exactly. No, it's so true. And so like, I mean, exactly what you said.
That's
But,
why no one should go to college until they're 25.
oh,
How's that for a bold statement, people?
it's a good one.
Yeah.
I think people are doing that more and more.
Yeah. Well, there's not an emphasis placed on helping people. There's emphasis is put on having a big church, having flashy, lights, how to have the great worship leader, how to have, if you're the pastor, how to, have a great 3-point message. And the emphasis is not placed on how do you actually walk people through their problems. Well, it's really it's counseling.
It totally is counseling.
But we tend to discredit counseling because you're like, why would you go to a counselor when you have the Holy Spirit? Which is a really, really,
It's like nails on a chalkboard.
yeah, it's very ignorant.
Yeah.
It's very ignorant because I'm trying not to bunny trail here, but if you
You can bunny trail.
all the way back to the beginning, God made Adam.
Bunny trail.
Bunny, here we go. God made Adam. What did God say? Adam's alone. It's not good for man to be alone.
Right.
If all you needed was God, it would be just Adam and God. Because Adam this was before the fall, so he had perfect communion with God.
Yep.
And yet God said, "Oh, yeah, he's alone."
Right.
So what does that tell you?
We were not created to just be us and God. It was us and God, not just one. Like Adam needed somebody.
Yeah, he did, because God said he's alone right now. So for him to no longer be alone, I need him to have relationship with someone like him.
Right.
So all that to go all the way back to say this is that pastors need to learn how to counsel. And a lot of times we throw that phrase pastor around.
Yep.
Well, a pastor, if you look at the fivefold ministry, pastor is an office, and there's a role of a pastor, but we use it generically. If you're the leader of a church, you're the pastor, but that doesn't mean that you operate in that gift. I think everyone who is leading in a church should have at least a basic understanding of how to pastor, even if it's not your primary gift, like in the fivefold. You should at least have a basic understanding of how that's going to, how that works. But I think realizing there's a big difference between being called a pastor and being pastored. And I think even that understanding is probably going to bring a lot of clarity for some people who really wanted to be pastored.
Yeah.
And they weren't pastored because the person that they were following wasn't a pastor.
Totally.
They're following a teacher, or they were following an evangelist. And each of these gifts has a specific role.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have an actual pastor on staff at your church, hey, there's a problem, first off.
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah. So there's a problem, because that's a huge part of this. You need all 5 operating as quickly as possible.
Yep.
In your church,
yep,
for you to be operating in the full extent of what God has for us. But that is a big reason why a lot of people get hurt.
Yeah.
Is that they're not being pastored. Churches aren't equipped to handle problems when they come up.
Yeah. And that's when Matt and I, when you and I first started kind of exploring emotional health and the importance of it within the church. I think at some point you and I started kind of like the cool thing when you go through counseling and you go through this whole journey, you start to have compassion for the people in your life, because you go back and you go, oh, they only did They only acted out of what they had. And for a lot of us growing up, the last 20 years or so in the church, um, there hasn't been an emphasis on the emotional health of the people, the emotional health of the pastor. People just saw pastor and they said whatever he or she says to do and however they act is okay because they're the pastor, and that gave people a lot of permission to treat people poorly. And we have now we are exploring this whole topic of emotional health within the church. And you and I have said, like, leaders need to be like uh self-awareness and having some of these tools that we talk about on other podcasts about, the ability to listen, the ability to um know how to like process emotion. And we have a whole bunch of resource on that. But if leaders don't have it, if leaders don't have these tools, how do you expect to help the people that come through your doors? You can't. Like, if you go to build a house and don't have the tools, guess what? You can't build the house.
Yeah. You can maybe build like one of those makeshift teepees that they build in the woods when you just lean a bunch of sticks together, but you can't build a house.
Right. If you don't know how it works, it's not gonna be livable. In the same way, if someone comes to you with problems, if you're not prepared, how do you help them? And the church is supposed to be that place that people are supposed to come to the church to get help. But when church hurt is a thing, sadly, church is not the first place that people think of when they're going through something, when they have to like air out their, dirty laundry or whatever the phrase is. I don't even know what the actual like right phrase is. They shouldn't be met with judgment and fear. They should be met with good counsel and compassion. And, because the last thing you want to feel is shame.
Yeah.
Shame, again, is what keeps people in this cycle. Shame is isolating. And if you don't know that and you use shame as a tool to get people to change, you are going to continue to have to use shame to keep them, perfect, or however, whatever you want to call it. But
yeah, I heard Eric Johnson said this years ago, and he said, "What gets you into the kingdom is what keeps you there."
Exactly. Like, that's perfect. What gets you into the kingdom is what keeps you there. And for so many people, it's shame, it's guilt. And the last time I checked, Jesus took those so that you don't have to carry them. You will experience shame and guilt
because they're emotions.
Because they're emotions. But the minute you shame someone into doing something you want them to do, you are going to have to continue to use that shame, to use that guilt. And that's not a good leader. That's actually a really bad leader. And that's what creates this hurt and this cycle with people, because they wake up and they're like, I was totally shamed into 20 years of my life, and I actually never was given the opportunity to be authentic and to be real, because the stuff that I was afraid to talk about and to show my pastor or my whoever, I was afraid because it was all performance. And save it for American Idol. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know where that came from, but
yeah. Well, so
I don't watch American Idol anymore.
I know what you're going to do if you ever make it to American Idol. Apparently, you're going to go on a rant.
There you go.
But that all ties into people really is another source. We talked about like a legalistic mentality.
Yeah.
We talked about churches not being being prepared to handle these people with problems, which is everyone. Just some people have bigger problems than others.
Yeah.
Because they've gone through something completely different.
Our experiences are different.
Yeah. And some people have had really, really difficult experiences that they've walked through. And with that comes a lot of pain. And those people who have experienced a lot of pain are going to require more care.
Right.
But a lot of times the church is this, oh, too big of a problem. We'll send this one along to the next church.
And the thing that there's so many things that get like missed in that mentality because and we've talked about this on other podcasts when someone experiences a victory in something and whether or not you had something to do with it, it's not about you, but when you steal that victory from somebody. Whoop, hold on guys, sorry. My iPhone paused. um when someone is not given the opportunity to experience a victory, then that person who would have had victory in whatever thing they were going through, they don't get to pass like your victory and your healing is never just for you, it's for the people that are in your community, people in your life, people that you meet, people that you teach. And
Your
when
sphere of influence, basically.
yeah, your sphere of influence. And when we don't provide people with the space to receive that healing and that victory, potentially you're stealing from a bunch of people because now that person can't go and give that key to somebody else because they does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's why we just need to be equipped and we need to be um safe for people to come to and to process and
Yeah.
um oftentimes that means you have to do some work yourself, but that's I don't know. I don't to me that doesn't seem like such a bad thing.
Right. Right. And that's because you carry that gift of the pastor.
Hmm. Yes, call me
The
pastor.
gift of the pastor.
Pastor Carla.
Pastor wife. Pastor wife. So unsafe people is really another. It's really another
It's huge.
category. That's why a lot of people end up getting hurt in the church is because there are people inside the church who are hurting people. And we've said this before, we'll say it again, but it's hurt people who hurt people.
Yeah.
We tend to wound people in the same ways that other people have wounded us. So one thing, I think this is just one of those like aha moments for a lot of people. If you've been hurt by someone, it's because they've been hurt in the same way. You can't give away something you don't have. And so you can and then the inverse of that is true. You can only give what you have.
Right.
If you have been wounded, you're going to accidentally, at least accidentally, some people have made a lifestyle of hurting other people, which is really sad. But you're going to end up hurting other people,
Yep.
and because you operate out of what you have. When the catch in all of this is healing, though. When you process what you've walked through, when you deal with the pain that you have been dealt, and you get that healing that you need, just like Carla was saying, that then becomes a victory in your life. And that victory, instead of operating out of the pain, you actually begin operating out of victory. And I think it's a great transition uh, into the next section, which is, why are you making faces at me?
I'm excited.
Transitioning into the next section, which is talking about what you do when you are hurt. And I just want to say this because I have this impression, and I think that there are people that are listening to this, either watching the video or they are listening to the podcast. But there are people who have right now, you've been hurt by the church, and you actually have a ministry of restoration on your life, and the Lord is actually wanting to walk you through your pain so that you are able to operate in this ministry that he has for you, which is to see other people healed in the same way that you've been healed. And so if that is resonating with you, I want you to pay attention to this next section, because we're going to talk about what you need to do if you've been church hurt. What do you do?
We could end it right there. So good.
Well, you can't end it right there because that's a cliffhanger.
You'll have to tune in next time for
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I want take it away. Like tell us, what do you have to do if you've been church hurt.
Oh, I think you have to just admit it. I think you have to take responsibility for the fact that you actually are feeling
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
A lot of us like to pretend we don't feel pain. And hey, guess what? You feel pain. You feel pain. There are what we call core emotions, which we've talked about on several occasions on this podcast. But these core emotions are emotions that we all experience. Every person alive, we experience these emotions, and one of them is pain. And the interesting thing is that when you experience emotional pain, it's the same as experiencing physical pain. You can't pretend it's not there. If somebody runs over your foot with a car, you're going to feel that pain. That's the same pain that you experience when someone is unkind to you. It triggers the exact same reaction in your brain.
Yeah, like your brain doesn't it doesn't
Differentiate.
differentiate between physical pain and emotional pain. It's pain.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fascinating if you think about it.
Yeah, it definitely is. So you can't ignore the fact that you've been hurt. A lot of us are like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'll be okay. Like, yeah, maybe you'll be okay, but you don't get okay by ignoring things.
Yep.
If you are physically wounded and you ignore your wound, it gets worse.
Didn't someone tell us like it's like a splinter under your fingernail? It's like it's small, but if you leave a splinter in your finger, eventually like it you can't live with the splinter underneath your fingernail. How if you've experienced that, it's small and you're like, not a big deal, not a big deal.
It's just a splinter.
But it's really painful. And same with a cut, same with, these things that, if they fester,
there's certain things,
science.
there's certain things that are going to heal themselves like a cut. But if you
Not
are,
all cuts.
right, there's a difference between a cut and a stab. Okay. If you've been stabbed,
it's a big cut.
People, if you've been stabbed in the natural, you're going to go to the hospital.
Go to
right?
the hospital. Yes.
That's a like a no-brainer. If you have been wounded emotionally, you need to get it taken care of, because here's what happens. If you don't take care of your pain, it gets worse. And instead of it being, I went through this thing and bummer, I'm really sad that I went through this, I wish it hadn't happened.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to work through it. Instead of being able to work through it, you actually start building part of your life around that pain.
Yeah.
And that pain becomes a driving force and a motivating force in your decisions.
And it becomes something you identify with, like, like I'm the person who, like this always happens to me. Like I'm always the one that gets, fill in the blank. And it's like,
yeah, now you're tiptoeing on maybe our next episode, the
victim
mentality.
But that's what happens. And people, like you said, like people will kind of go through life. Oh, I'm fine. Well, yep, great. That pain or that hurt is going to manifest somewhere else because it's still there. You can close it maybe in this part of your life, but that hurt and that frustration and that pain and that bitterness it's now going to like pop up down the road. Like it's why you blow up at I don't blow up at you, but it's why you blow up at your spouse about something that has nothing to do with them, but it has to do with like 3 days ago when you had this little thing that happened between you and your spouse, but you didn't say anything, which does not happen.
Never, ever happens.
That's a lie. And it does happen. And we've gotten a lot better at it because I could go years without saying what was bothering me. And like
you did for some things.
And I did. It wasn't until I learned these tools of how to like express yourself and like it's okay to like talk about stuff. It wasn't until then that whole thing kind of got figured out. But
anyway, that is all to say, it's important to take care of your pain. You need to realize that you have been wounded. It's not okay that you've been wounded. Like it's a bummer that you went through that. But if you're experiencing pain, it's okay. You're human. You're supposed to experience pain, but you're supposed to take your pain and work through it and give it to Jesus.
Yeah. And that looks different for a lot of people.
Yeah.
If you have a safe person, like to answer the question, like what do? Find people who are safe And if you are looking, if people who are watching and listening, if you don't know someone who is safe, we know people who are safe that we can recommend to you. That's just a,
Some
a,
great
a
some
PSA.
great counselors and therapists that we would
Yes.
love to introduce you to.
Yes. Like that off the bat.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Whenever you don't process through your pain, obviously there's a lot of problems that that we've already mentioned. But here's the really interesting thing is that when we don't process through our pain and we don't release forgiveness, which is what happens when you process through your pain, when you don't do that, you end up giving that person permanent space in your life.
Right.
And forgiveness is one of those things that is funny because we don't like to forgive people sometimes because we feel like forgiving people is saying it's okay that they did that, and that's not what forgiveness is. But whenever, and there's some really interesting parables about that Jesus told about forgiveness, and if you don't, just look up the verse where it says, if you don't, so this will happen to you if you don't forgive your brother from your heart. I wish I had that reference with me, but basically,
Tattoo it.
yeah, hopefully I've worked through my own forgiveness enough that I don't need that tattooed on me. But forgiveness actually steals from you, but it also, uh, unforgiveness gives power to the person who hurt you.
Absolutely.
Because think about it. That person, you have decided to always be mad at them. So every time you think about them, you get mad. Every time you think about what you went through, you get angry. That person has power over your life. Do you want to carry around that thing for the rest of your life? You really don't.
The answer is no.
No, trust me, you don't want to carry around unforgiveness because that person has permanent power over you. And if you've been wounded by people in the church, you're allowing someone who hurt you to keep you from Jesus. You're allowing people who hurt you to keep you from getting what you need. And that is a tragedy.
It is a
Those people
tragedy.
have too much power in your life. And unforgiveness, this is the classic quote, not releasing forgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Unforgiveness does not give you power over them, and it's absolutely the opposite. It keeps that other person in power over you, and it only hurts you.
Yeah.
So, walking through your pain, releasing forgiveness, a big key to that is compassion. Compassion is the key to forgiveness because that when you realize that the people who hurt you were hurt the same way themselves, you should feel compassion toward them because that should help you realize, wow, they're going through the same thing that I'm going through.
And no one showed them, or they were shown and decided no to the tools that could help them. And I think the 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 thing with our generation, the just the openness and the welcoming of topics like this is a game changer, because the generation before us, they didn't have it. I mean, you ask your if you're in your 30s, ask your parents if they're, if they were in church, or maybe not even in church. Ask your parents, "Ooh, was the topic of emotional health even a thing?" Most of the time, they're going to say no. No one was aware of any of this. Um, and now this is becoming a really like hot topic, and
It's
people
an
are
important topic.
it's an important topic. And I think you and I said this once, like when we were traveling and talking at churches, um, like when the church gets healthy, that's when it's at its most powerful, because this thing about emotional health, again, the whole like shame driven culture, guilt driven culture, that gets thrown out, which I think again is the one of the enemy's biggest, you know like he thinks he's got it all figured out. Like shame is like the oldest trick in the book. But when Christians start to break open like this revelation of if we get healed, then we get to heal people. Like Jesus heals, but hurt people, healed people, heal people. That's kind of
Yeah.
like the other part of it. Um, and to like wrap, talking about church hurt, and if you know people in your own life that you've seen walk away from church, and you're kind of like wondering, like scratching your head, how do I play a part? Like, what's my response in all of this? And what I've learned in my own personal, because I have had family members, I've had friends who have left, and some have come back, some haven't. But what I've realized is we don't get people to come back to church by uh like pushing them, or by shaming them, or by you know essentially that. People come back when they discover that you're interested in seeing them healed and whole, versus wanting to control them. And I think control is that like icky taste in people's mouths. Like, church was just a bunch of people controlling me, telling me I couldn't go to parties, I couldn't sleep with my boyfriend, I couldn't do drugs. I mean, that's a whole other topic, and there's a reason why you were told as a kid that those things are bad. And that's, maybe we should make note, that's another topic for another time. But when people discover that you're interested in them and in their journey and their healing, and you're not going to sit there and judge them, I mean, they'll know they're Christians by their love. Like, it's old, and it's cliche, but it's true. And I think that's what we have
It's
to.
also biblical.
It's also biblical. I mean, that's a whole that's true too.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's kind of where this whole thing we can kind of land
Yeah,
on
we'll wrap it
that
up.
on that topic. Is people, you don't get people to come back to church and to come back to the Lord by controlling them. They come back to church and to the Lord when they discover the people in their lives are there to come alongside them, to help them, to share the gospel. I can't tell you how many times I've said to people, like, if it's not kind, it's not Jesus. Like, Jesus is kind. He's a good father.
Yeah.
Whatever you've been told, that he's manipulative and controlling, and doesn't want you to have fun, or however it was depicted to you as a child, as a teenager, if it's not kind, it's not Jesus. If it's not merciful, it's not Jesus. If it's judgmental, guess what?
Not
Not
Jesus.
Jesus. And so so many topics, so many
Yeah.
things to talk about. Getting excited.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's a safe thing to say that if you've been hurt by the church, then it is uh so often it's because people don't actually know who Jesus is.
Perfect. I'm not even gonna say anything. That is exactly it.
You don't know who Jesus is, you don't know
Copy.
how to copy and paste.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Jesus is, you don't know how to respond the right way. And a lot of people respond the wrong way because they actually don't know who Jesus is. And that is a huge passion of both of ours.
Yeah.
But that is a big passion. I run another podcast called Culture, and I talk a lot about that because I think that is one of the biggest problems in the church is the church actually doesn't know who Jesus is. Because if we knew who Jesus really was, how
Yep.
much he loved us, how much he cared for us, it would absolutely transform our lives. It would transform our churches, and it would transform everyone we know, because that's just the power of Jesus. Jesus is so transformational.
Yeah.
So anyway, all this to say, friends, if you've been hurt by the church, remember those people are hurt. Those people who hurt you are super hurt themselves. And if you continue to stay bitter and you continue to not forgive, there are some serious repercussions in your life that we don't want for you. And
Yeah.
really, you don't want for you. You are allowing somebody who hurt you to steal from you, to continue to steal from you. Tell me, what is the plan of the enemy to get you into a closer relationship with God and his people, or to keep you out, to keep you on the outside looking in, to keep you angry at people who hurt you? It's a really simple answer. It's not the first one. The devil does not want you to go to church. He doesn't want you to be in fellowship with people who are pursuing Jesus. He doesn't want that for you. And so he wants to do everything he can to keep you away from there. So that is going to be where we wrap this up. If you have any questions or topics that you want answered, talked about in the next episode or a future episode, please let us know. You can email us. Is coaching@mattandcarlastinton.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also hit us up on Instagram or leave a comment on YouTube. And all that stuff.
Or this is like, we're like coming to summer, and I just figured last summer was crazy and wild, but this year we are ready to hit the road. So
yeah, or if you have questions, you could just invite us over.
We are.
That's what you're saying?
I'm just saying we're up for travel. That's all. I feel like you have to like have a little card that says like, I'm up for travel.
Okay to travel.
Yep. So we are excited and willing.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in having us come and talk at your church or lead worship at your church and talk about this, talk about other things, we'd love that. I think that's what you're trying to say.
I am trying to say that.
Okay. Great. Well, now that that's said, thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next time. Until then, I'm going to move closer to my phone to end this.